Welcome to the Find Your Feminine Fire podcast. I'm your host, renowned sex and relationship coach Amanda Testa. And if you are looking to reclaim your sexual desire, take sex from a to-do to something you look forward to, and enjoy deeply connected relationships without adding more to your already full plate, then you are in the right place. Listen in to discover how to fan the flames of your feminine fire, fall in love with your sensual self again, and experience intimacy like never before, all in a way that feels really good to your system. Make yourself comfortable and enjoy the episode. Have you ever wanted to talk to your partner about sex but felt completely awkward, afraid of rejection, or unsure of where even to begin? Maybe you've tried, but the conversation led to an argument, defensiveness, shutdown, or frustration instead of deeper intimacy. If you've ever struggled to communicate your desires, express what's really on your heart, or bring more connection and passion into your relationship, this episode is for you. If you're a high achiever who is incredible at leading in your career, but find it way harder to be vulnerable and ask for what you need in your intimate life, you're not alone. You might feel confident in so many areas of your life, but when it comes to talking about sex, you freeze, overthink, or worry about being too much. This episode will help you navigate these conversations with confidence, clarity, and ease without feeling awkward or making your partner feel defensive. Research shows that couples who talk openly about their desires and sex lives report higher relationship satisfaction, stronger emotional bonds, and even better orgasms. Okay. But for many women, these conversations are full of unspoken fears: fear of hurting their partner's feelings, fear of rejection, fear of feeling selfish or wanting more. The truth is, how we talk about sex is just important as the sex itself. And in today's episode, I'm going to give you real practical tools to make these conversations feel natural, connected, and even, dare I say, fun. By the end of this episode, you will know how to bring up sex in a way that feels natural and comfortable, the exact words and scripts to use to express your desires without pressure or conflict, how to navigate resistance or defensiveness in your partner if that happens. You're going to learn about the surprising connection between nervous system regulation and sexual communication, an important key, and how to make these conversations an ongoing part of your relationship instead of a one-time thing. I'm Amanda Tester, your host here on Find Your Feminine Fire. I help high-achieving women reconnect to their pleasure, their bodies, and their relationships so they can live a life that feels deeply fulfilling, both inside and outside the bedroom. So let's dive into the episode. Let's talk about why this matters. Because I'll be honest with you, I talk with so many clients who really feel challenged in this area, even in the best relationships. It could just be something that maybe you have been in a period of your life where you've gone through some changes. Maybe you're in the perimenopausal, menopausal stage of life. Maybe someone has had an illness. Maybe there's been a challenge in your family. Maybe there's been a death in the family. There's been a winter. So talking about sex can feel vulnerable, even if you have a great relationship. And oftentimes, many high achieving women struggle with this because we are great communicators in some areas of our lives, but maybe it feels hard when you're in intimacy. Maybe you don't want to feel like you're too needy or too much. You worry about hurting your partner's feelings or having them shut down. We've been conditioned to prioritize our partner's comfort above our own. But here's the truth. If you want an amazing sex life, you have to talk about it. The other night, one of my friends is a DO here in Denver and does a lot of work around hormones. And she has a little monthly meeting. And I was there, and it was interesting because we were talking about desire. But quite a few of the women in the group were just talking about, I just feel so embarrassed to talk about this. What if I hurt my partner's feelings? What if they get defensive? Or what if I shut them down? Or what if we get into a big fight? And I don't even really know what I want right now. And I mean, maybe I don't want to even put it out there because I'm afraid I'll be rejected, all the things. There's so much around this. So it's understandable that it would feel hard. But it's not about fixing something. What it is about, it's deepening your connection and deepening your pleasure for the both of you. You're allowed to have desires. You are allowed to ask for what you want. And many women intellectually know we should talk about sex. But the moment they try, they freeze, shut down, or go into this people-pleasing fawning mode. It's not just about discomfort. It's a nervous system response rooted in past experiences. Your body might be perceiving sexual conversations as a threat, even if your partner is a safe one. So we can use somatic practices like breath work, grounding, gentle touch to regulate our nervous system before and during the conversation. This is a lot of the work I do with my clients. So here's a question for you. What happens in your body? Maybe just even imagine that you are going to express your desires. Do you tighten up? Do you get sweaty? Do you feel the urge to rush through it? This is where your deeper work lies. The cultural messaging is deep here. We have been conditioned to believe as women that if I ask for more, I'm being selfish. If I need something different, I must be broken. If I can't orgasm from penetration, something's wrong with me. When in actuality, 95% of women cannot. If I say I'm unsatisfied, I'll hurt my partner's feelings. And it's really not just about sex. It's how women have been taught to suppress their desires in all areas of life. So what we want to do is identify the scripts, the shame, the things that we've absorbed and rewrite them. Instead of thinking to yourself, I shouldn't need this, you could try, my desires are valid and worthy of being heard. And this is a question to think about. If there were no fear, guilt, or shame, what would you ask for in your sex life? Another challenge can be power dynamics. Maybe there's an unspoken power dynamic in your relationship that makes these conversations feel unsafe. If you've always been the one accommodating your partner, it might feel terrifying to suddenly take up space. Perhaps there's past relationship baggage that makes these conversations feel riskier than they actually are. And what we can do here is you can start small, right? You can take baby steps, doing the little doable things that get you in the direction of what you want. Instead of diving into a massive conversation about sex, you can start with, hey, I'd love to check in about what feels really good for both of us. Would you be open to a fun conversation about that? Make it feel playful. And here's another question to think about. Do you feel like you and your partner are on equal footing when it comes to sex and communication? If not, what might need to shift? And you can start working on those things. Oftentimes, there's unspoken fear or grief that can come up in these conversations, right? As I mentioned earlier, maybe your sex life has changed due to stress, kids, resentment, health issues. There can be deep grief underneath the surface. And often we can avoid this conversation because maybe women are afraid of realizing just how disconnected they've become in the relationship. They aren't sure if their partner is even open or cares enough to change. They're scared to acknowledge that things don't feel like they used to. So, what you want to do is you want to acknowledge that grief. Let it be okay to mourn. It can be okay to mourn past intimacy while also committing to creating something new. Tuning into yourself and tuning in and understanding, what is the fear here? What's the fear underneath avoiding this conversation? Am I being afraid of loss, of rejection, of realizing things need to change? This is often deeper work that might be under the surface that you might need to examine before you have these conversations. Sexual communication issues are rarely just about sex. If there's unspoken resentment in the relationship, over mental load, lack of appreciation, past betrayals, unmet needs, that energy will show up in the bedroom. Women often try to fix sex without first addressing the emotional root of the disconnection. And you can always start with emotional connection. Maybe have an emotional check-in first before diving into sex talks. Start with something like, hey, I've been feeling a little distant from you lately, and I'd love to reconnect emotionally and physically. Can we talk about that? Oftentimes, if you're feeling something, your partner is too. And maybe they also have fears that they are afraid to address. Maybe tuning in and asking yourself the question, are there any unspoken frustrations or needs that need to be addressed before deeper intimacy can return? When it comes to talking about sex, many women default to feeling frustrated, feeling resentment, shutting down, and especially if the partner seems dismissive or uninterested or unwilling to engage. But what if the way you approach the conversation could shift everything? This is where we move from criticism to curiosity. Because criticism shuts down intimacy and curiosity opens it up. Criticism feels like blame. If you approach your partner with statements like, you never initiate sex anymore, I need you to be more affectionate, you're not listening to what I want, that will immediately put them on the defensive. Even if your feelings are completely valid, your partner's nervous system may perceive this as an attack, triggering resistance or withdrawal. Curiosity, on the other hand, invites a conversation instead of a confrontation. Instead of saying, I need you to do X, you could try, I'd love to explore X together. How do you feel about that? So I'll give you some examples here because I think it's helpful to have scripts and words to use. For example, you don't want to say, you never touched me like you used to. You could, however, say, I miss the way we used to touch and be affectionate. I'd love to find ways to bring that back. How do you feel about it? Here's another example. You never prioritize intimacy. Don't want to say that. You do. How about you could try, I feel so close to you when we're intimate. What do you think would help us create more of those moments? These small shifts lower defensive reactions, and they make your partner feel like you're on the same team instead of pointing fingers. You can also set a boundary. Curiosity is powerful, but it is also important to hold your needs as valid without feeling guilty about it. If you've softened the approach, created space for the conversation, and your partner is still unwilling to engage, this is where you set the boundary. Instead of saying, I need you to change or this isn't going to work, which can sound like an ultimatum and trigger defensiveness once again, you could try, this is something that matters deeply to me, and I'd love to find a way to meet in the middle. This approach will communicate that your needs are non-negotiable, shows that you're willing to work together on a solution, and make it clear that avoiding the conversation is not an option. I want to give you some tips if your partner is avoidant or dismissive. And if your partner is completely avoiding the topic, minimizing your concerns, or refusing to engage, this is where you can take a bigger perspective. You can ask yourself, if we don't talk about this, what do you think will happen to our intimacy long term? You can think about that for yourself. You could even talk to your partner about it because this will shift the focus from short-term avoidance to long-term consequences. Also encouraging self-reflection, forcing them to consider what happens if nothing changes. And if they brush it off or refuse to engage, that is a sign that deeper work needs to be done, not just around sex, but around emotional intimacy, communication, and shared values. That's where help from a professional can really be supportive. I have supported many clients in this area. And one of the things time and time again that I find is that people want to have a harmonious, helpful relationship. They don't know how to do it. We've never learned the tools. So often it's as simple as that. And this is where it gets real around, are you willing to hold your own needs as important? Because if you've done everything right, you've approached with curiosity, you've set clear boundaries, you've asked the deeper questions, and your partner still refuses to engage, then it's time to tune in and ask yourself, am I willing to hold my own needs as non-negotiable? Am I willing to advocate for myself, even if it's uncomfortable? Am I willing to have the hard conversation about what it means for our relationship if intimacy isn't prioritized? Because here's the thing, your pleasure, your connection, your fulfillment in your relationship matters. And ignoring your needs for the sake of avoiding discomfort only leads to more resentment, more distance, and disconnection. At the end of the day, a partnership is about mutual care and growth. Your needs deserve to be met. Your partner's needs deserve to be met. And there's ways to meet in the middle. So if your partner shuts down every time you bring up intimacy, dismisses your needs as unimportant, or refuses to engage in conversations about sex, then it's time to ask yourself, is this the kind of relationship I truly want? And if not, what would it look like to advocate for more? And again, some people are totally happy with the way things are, and that's fine. This is not for you. If you are not happy, this is for you. Because this isn't just about sex, it's about valuing your own needs, trusting your own voice, and believing you deserve to be fully met in your relationship. Here's some questions for you to reflect on. What would it look like to express my desires with confidence instead of fear? Where am I holding back in conversations because I'm afraid of my partner's reaction? What do I need to remind myself in moments where I feel like my needs don't matter? And I just want to remind you that your desires are valid, they matter. Your pleasure is worth prioritizing. And it is 100% okay to expect your partner to meet you halfway. Now, we've got these things covered. How do we set the stage for a sex positive conversation? How do we do this? Let me first tell you what not to do. Do not bring it up during or immediately after sex. Timing is key. You never want to start with criticism. As I said earlier, we never have sex anymore. You don't touch me the way I like. Don't do that. Don't ambush your partner when they're stressed or distracted. What you do want to do is choose a neutral, relaxed time when you're both open to the conversation. And it's helpful to even ask in advance. Do you have some time to chat later? I'd love to just have some uninterrupted time to talk. So you can choose a neutral, relaxed time when you're both open to the conversation, using curiosity and playfulness instead of pressure, and start with appreciation instead of complaints. When you start with appreciation, again, that sets the stage for a more conducive experience. You can say things like, I love when you kiss my neck like that. It drives me wild. Or I love feeling connected to you, and I'd love to explore ways to make our intimacy even better. And remember, we're talking about connection, not performance. Some other scripts you can use for expressing your desires without blame, instead of saying things like, I feel we never have sex anymore. I don't like the way you touch me. Don't want to do that. You can try, again, saying things that make them feel seen and desired, because that's a big important part. I love having sex with you. I love being intimate with you. And I miss that part of our connection. I'd love to find ways to bring more of that into our relationship. I'm curious your thoughts around that. Focus on what you want more of instead of what's wrong. And if your partner gets defensive, you can simply say, I know this might feel like a sensitive topic. And I just want you to know that this is coming from a place of love. I'm not saying anything is wrong. I just want to explore more together. And I'm wondering, is there anything you've been wanting more of too? Because again, this is not about fixing anything. It's about exploring deeper pleasure together. This is often just stuff we've not been taught, and these are learned skills. I think that's the one thing to remember. There's so much we can learn. Now, how do you keep these things going on the long term? How do you keep the conversation open and ongoing? Because when we're talking about sex, it isn't just a one and done conversation, just like educating your children about it. It's a continual conversation. So how can you do this so it feels fun? And I'll share some ideas. You can see what lands for you in your relationship, but it can be where you just have sexy check-ins periodically, making it a regular, normal part of your conversation. I love the idea of creating desire lists. This is something that I talk about a lot. And when we talk about desire lists, that's writing down things that you would like to explore, that you want to try, that you're curious about. And you can each write a list, and then you can come together and talk about it. And you can say, okay, is this a red, yellow, or green? Red is no, I'm not open to trying that. Yellow is I might be open to trying that. We could talk about it more. And green is yes, I would be open to trying that. And then you find where the yeses overlap, where the greens overlap, and you can try those things. You put them in a jar. You can play with them, make it fun. And I also find that when we talk about intimacy, we can redefine what that means because it's not just about sex, it's about connection, it's about touch, it's about playfulness. There's so many ways to create more intimacy and connection that don't just involve what we might currently think about what sex looks like. So it's expanding your definition of what that is and learning more. The other thing is remembering to be aware of your nervous system. If one of you gets activated, that's the time to pause, breathe, take a break, and come back when you both feel more relaxed, more resourced. And realizing that it's normal that these conversations can bring up a lot because for all of us, there's numerous things usually wrapped up in the conversation. But you want it to feel not like a chore, but as an invitation to connect more deeply. So, how can you make it more fun, flirty, and exciting? Is make it like a game or an exploration. You could try, would you rather? That's always a fun way to do, right? Would you rather have a spontaneous quickie or a long, slow night of passion? You can play with this. You could play with fantasies. That can always be fun to fantasize and visualize what you might like. If we could design the perfect night together, what would you want? What would be the most romantic thing you could imagine, or the sexiest thing, or what are some desires that you have that would be fun to talk about? Doesn't mean we even have to do it, just have fun talking about it. You could play the appreciation game. Tell me one thing I do in bed that drives you wild, and I'll do the same for you. What is something you really love that I do? And this is something for you to think about. What is one way you can make talking about sex feel less like a chore and make it feel more playful? Instead of a serious discussion, how could you add more levity to it, more fun and playfulness? And I'll invite you to focus on what could go right. Because here's the truth I will tell you more often than not, having these conversations, when approached with love, curiosity, and openness, it leads to deeper intimacy, more connection, and yes, better sex. Most partners want to please you, they just don't know how yet. One of my clients was a busy business owner, and she came to me looking to find more pleasure in her everyday life and to find better connection with her husband. She was busy taking care of her business, her animals, her farm, and her granddaughter. And after our work together, she shared, my husband and I are connecting in every facet of life better. It's like magic. I put most of the attributes to you, and I feel like I've met my goal for sure when I had you coach me because there's not enough things I can give you. We're connecting, we're dancing again. It's been a treasure. A lot of times I work with clients who are trying to reconnect after kids. They love each other very much, but with schedules of work and traveling and kids, they realize their sex life has been neglected. So, some recent clients, Jamin, shared with me that meeting with Amanda forced us to make time in our busy schedules to connect with each other, which we so desperately needed. Amanda has an incredible talent to meet us where we were without judgment and guide us through some really spectacular connection exercises. I also love that her engagement didn't end at the end of the program. She checks in and makes sure we continue to foster the relationship that started it all. We are so thankful for the rejuvenation her program provided to our relationship because that's sometimes just what it is. It's reprioritizing things, reprioritizing what brought you together in the first place. And most partners really want to satisfy you. They just may not know how. So this could show up like they are insecure about whether they're doing the right things. They've never had an open, shame-free conversation about sex before. They could be, again, operating from their own fears, past experiences, or assumptions about what they think intimacy should look like. And this means that when you open the conversation in a way that feels safe, you are actually creating an incredible opportunity for connection. Instead of them wondering if something is wrong, they get clear guidance on how to love you in the way you most deeply desire. So instead of assuming your partner will take it personally, assume they will be grateful for the chance to understand you better. And remember, if this feels hard, it's not a sign that your relationship is doomed. It's a sign that this is a growth edge, and growth edges, when embraced, create more trust and security between partners. When you talk about sex with honesty and vulnerability, you show your partner that you trust them enough to share what's on your heart. You strengthen emotional intimacy by opening up about what feels good and what you desire. And you make it normal to check in, so sex becomes a conversation, not a guessing game. So, what if you believed it would bring you closer? Because again, time and time again, I see couples who were stuck in a rut and now feel playful and connected again, thought they had mismatched libidos and realized they just weren't communicating that desire clearly, felt pressure and avoidance around intimacy, and now feel like they're co-creating something beautiful together. Because when you make these conversations a normal part of your relationship, intimacy becomes something to explore together. And I do want to acknowledge that yes, it can feel uncomfortable, but on the other side of that discomfort is always something better, more passion, more closeness, more trust. And if you have been holding back from talking about sex because you're afraid of how it will go, just ask yourself, what if this could bring us closer? What if my partner is more open than I think? What if talking about this actually makes our relationship even stronger? Because more often than not, that's exactly what happens. So I'll just encourage you to take the leap and start this conversation, because what's waiting for you on the other side is so worth it. Your pleasure is not selfish, it's essential. And when you own your desires and communicate them with confidence, you give your partner permission to do the same. The more you normalize these conversations, the more natural they become. If this episode resonated with you and you want deeper support in your intimacy and relationships, book a private coaching call with me here. You can go to amandatessa.com/apply, and I would love to support you. I have lots of great resources, and you don't need to suffer. You can live a life of more connection and more joy and more pleasure, and really be the leader that you want, both inside and outside of the bedroom, because more often than not, the way we show up in one way is a way we show up in all ways. And this creates an opportunity for us to show up bigger and brighter in all areas of our life. And we today need this more than ever. Have those conversations. If you need support, reach out. And if you have a friend who you know would benefit from this episode, please pass it along. Sending you so much love. We will see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Find Your Feminine Fire podcast. If you loved this episode, please go ahead and forward it right now to someone you know would love it. And if you've not had a chance yet to leave us a rave review on Apple Podcasts, please make sure to rate and review if you enjoyed it, as well as make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you want to stay connected, make sure to go to amandatesta.com/thegoods to download your free sensuality activation and stay connected. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.